What is going on, Facebook Live? It is yours truly, Brian Sinkoff, licensed associate real estate broker with Muccio Real Estate Group, alongside my good friend, Drew Aiello. Drew is from Fairway Independent Mortgage.
That's good. Usually people forget about the independent part, but yes, I'm a branch manager in Clifton Park and happy to be here. Actually, I just said this to you before we went on. I've never done this before, so this is going to be fun.
Never done Facebook Live like this.
Facebook Live.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, plenty of
TV, radio,
yes.
But never Facebook Live.
Yes. All right. So, just getting everything adjusted here. Give me a thumbs up, everybody, if you can hear me. All right. I do have the mic on. That should provide some great sound for us. We're actually in the Muccio Real Estate Albany Shaker office. You can see behind me, awesome map. Beautiful of the entire capital region. Great conference room. Pay me a visit here to the office, won't you? All right, so let's talk a little bit about the, and again, thumbs up if you can hear me. Give me your you can post questions in this thread as well. All right.
Let me know if I have to talk like this.
You may, you may. Don't threaten me with a good time. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the housing market right now, Drew, because you know, you hear a lot of gloom and doom, and I always tell people when you Google something, you know, you have a sore throat, you Google it, you got esophageal cancer. You know what I mean? You get stung by it, right? You get stung by a bee. You look at the bee sting. Next thing you know, you got 6 months to live because you got some sort of ringworm that's that is in a third world country like that doesn't exist. So we're going to get a little wacky on this. Don't Google. Yeah, don't Google.
It's like
Stay
Sebastian Maniscalco. He's one of my favorite comedians.
Yes.
He says he had dry hands, so he Googled it. Next thing you know, he's reading about people that have cut their hand off.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't do that.
So ease up on the Google. So we hear the gloom and doom. We hear, the interest rates are going up. We hear all of this stuff. But Drew, it's not as doom and gloom as the national media would make it out to be.
I agree. I think unfortunately, with a lot of news media outlets, if it bleeds, it reads, so to speak. So they thrive on the doom and gloom. I know that a lot of places, even the majors like a CNBC, they always talk about the negative. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, and it's obviously not the case for guys that are in the trenches on a daily basis. We're seeing the market, we're witnessing the market, we're experiencing the market, we're talking to buyers and sellers, and of course doing financing. Yes, let's face it, interest rates have gone up. Interest rates have gone up though for a good reason. We have inflation. And we have a hot economy, and that hot economy and that inflation rate is not sustainable. 2 years ago we got 20% rate of return on real estate. This year we'll probably get 8 to 10% return on real estate. Long term, that's not sustainable. So what the Fed does is try to increase interest rates to slow down the market a little bit, slow down the buying options, not just on real estate, but on cars and boats and all the miscellaneous items that we purchase. So I think they've done a good job up till now. I think they started too late. They should have started bumping rates maybe a year ago, and you said that actually.
I said that a year ago. We literally last fall, it might have been right around Halloween, I said, Drew, let's go back here for a second. Not to interrupt you, but the real estate market, it's my line. I love this line. The real estate market the last 2 years was eBay on crack.
Right.
Okay. It was flat out eBay on crack. It wasn't sustainable. It wasn't realistic. It was absurd. And I want to just give you a quick story because people like the stories to, because we could sit here, we could talk all night and day about stats and facts and figures and factoids.
Instead of sell it with Sinkoff, how about story with Sinkoff?
Yeah, story with Sinkoff time.
Story with Sinkoff.
So let me give you this story. This is and you guys can Google this, you guys and gals. Well, no, you can Google it to see that this house existed.
Check.
Right, this is a fact checking. It was 8 Clement Drive in Averill Park, okay? The market 6 months ago is not like it is today. And we're telling you that is not a bad thing, despite what you have heard. I said a year ago to Drew, to a lot of people in the industry, to a lot of my colleagues, to buyers and sellers. I said, the rates have to go up. It's too high. Or it's too low, excuse me. So let's go back to this story. This is March of this year. I did an open house. This house listed in Averill Park. The house was $250. Actually, no, you didn't, because I had the sellers. It was just a typical ranch in Averill Park, $250. I had 17 offers, 45 showings, 42 people through a 2-hour open house.
That's unbelievable.
That is not an exaggeration. I had 17 offers.
And that's just 6 months ago. You saed March?
Correct, March.
Yeah.
The house, and I can say this now because it already is closed, the house went for $70,000 over the asking price.
Wow. And that's just a 250 base listing?
250, it's sold for 320. Google it, 8 Clement Drive.
Was it a cash offer, by the way?
It's not a cash offer, but inspections were waived.
Then they got an appraisal and it appraised?
It actually appraised.
That's the market.
Okay, so let's go back to that. We talked about multiple offers, 17 offers. It was a conventional loan, no inspections, $70,000 over the asking price. Okay, now let's go back to the doom and gloom. The doom and gloom is, the market's, it's slowed down. You're right.
Yeah.
It's not that anymore.
Thank God.
The market, Drew, is now, there's a couple offers on the property, and maybe it goes maybe $15,000 over the asking price. You're not seeing the eBay on crack anymore. You're not seeing 7 offers. You're actually seeing, and we talked about this before we went on
Right.
this Facebook Live. You're seeing VA loans again. You're seeing FHA loans again. Drew, talk to us a little bit. Talk to us a little bit about that buyer. This market, because it's slowed down a little bit. And yes, the interest rates have risen up, which has meant less buyers. But that means believe it or not, the buyer pool is actually open.
The buyer pool is open because the market, as you have stated, has softened a little bit, where you're not seeing double-digit offers on a house. So I think sellers are more apt to negotiate. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you could reinforce that, but from what I've seen, anything that starts with an A, FHA, VA, USDA, we haven't seen those types of loans in 2.5 years, ever since this market took off. Because if someone had an FHA, VA, or USDA loan, which is a government-insured loan, the appraisal requirements are much more stringent. And sellers, if they're looking at 20 offers, they're going to pick the one that's the easiest to get through. And
there was no FHA, VA, USDA concessions. That was not happening for 2 years.
And unfortunately, you have this massive buyer pool that lives in the FHA, VA, USDA world. Not everybody has tens of thousands of dollars set aside to buy a house. So they need help with seller concessions. They need help with lower down payment requirements. And those people basically shut out of the market for the last 2.5 years. Because if you witnessed it, if you had an offer with 10 conventional loans, no seller concessions, and then you got the guy that has the FHA or VA that needs seller concessions.
Bye, to quote In Sync.
Yeah.
Bye. Hey. Bye.
It's like doing your thing in the wind, as we always say. It's a waste of time. Unfortunately, that buyer's been shut out. Now that buyer is coming back to the market. I've actually done the first few FHA loans that I've done in probably 2.5 years. I took a contract in over the weekend that actually had $289 purchase price with a $10,000 seller concession. So it's the market was way out of whack, and for a good reason. There's a lot of demand versus supply, not the crazy mortgage stuff that we saw in 2008, 2009. That was caused by the mortgage industry. Mm-hmm. This is a well-balanced market with supply demand. We're underwriting from a banking standpoint since 2008 with pay stubs, with W-2s, with bank statements, tax returns. We're not saying, oh, Brian, you have a pulse, you can get a mortgage. That stuff is all out the window 20 years ago. So now it is a much more stable market. and there's buyers and sellers, and it's really just supply demand. There's more demand right now than there is supply, and I think that'll probably continue for the next few years. But I would not say the market is going down, meaning the media outlets, like we referenced in the beginning, the market is appreciating by less, but it's not going negative. And that's confusing to a lot of people to understand.
And let's get into that, because you bring up a great point. Okay, we talked about basically the FHA, the VA loan, the seller concession buyer basically being shut out of the market. In fact, I had a few buyers that wanted to get an FHA loan and they needed concessions, and I was just straight up blunt and honest with them, and I said, I'll talk to you in a year. You know, I said, we'll try it, but I think after one or two times they looked and there's 6 offers on a house, you know, they kind of just raised a white flag and said, now's not the time. And we're going to reiterate this again. This was a different market 6 months ago, a year ago, than it is now. I want to say two of the last 3 houses I've sold, one of them had a USDA loan. I'm talking about my listings. The buyer had a USDA loan, which would have been unheard of 6 months ago, certainly a year ago.
Right.
Another had an FHA loan with seller concession.
Right.
Which unheard of. That, go back to Clement, 8 Clement, that was 17 offers. We had some that sellers concessions, they were laughed at and it's crossed out. You had no shot. You know, you finished 15th of 17th with the seller concession.
Right.
So you talk about, you know, everyone says, well, the market's going down. The market's not as good as it is. Yeah, because the appreciation rate last year was 20%. This year it's 9%. Next year it might be 4%. But Drew, because that might be a different language to people not in the real estate. Now explain what the heck I just said.
So yes, last year we got 20%. This year, when it's all said and totaled in, we'll probably get anywhere from 8 to 10% appreciation, which is phenomenal. Historically speaking, and I've been doing this now, I think January will be 28 years that I've been in this industry. Historically speaking, real estate's done 2, 3, 4% on average.
That's normal.
That's a normal market.
That's normal.
And
what do you mean by that? Explain what that means.
Like if you buy a house for $100,000, next year it might be worth $102,000 or
$104,000, right?
Right.
That's 4%.
So that's normal, because 20%, 10% is not sustainable. It's not healthy. So it's
eBay on crack.
Right. And this is again what the Fed's trying to do. The Fed's trying to bump rates to slow down the buying, which they're doing, to get back to a more normal market. And that's what I think we're heading into. Now, that being said, since I'm a numbers guy, and you trust me with the numbers,
I better.
Real estate is still the number one place that I think, not just because I'm in the mortgage business, but the number one place that I'd like to put my money. Because if you think about it, next year, let's say Zillow, I think, said 4% next year, but let's say it's 3%. Just to be conservative, I always like to be conservative with my numbers. But if you got 3% next year and you bought a house for $350,000, let's say, for example, you put down 10%, so you ponied up $35,000, which is 10% of 350, and you got 3% rate of return, you made $10,500 on your investment of 10% down, which is $35,000. Do the math. You got $10,500 in appreciation. You put up $30,000 or $35,000, and you earn 30% on your money. 30%
in 1 year.
In 1 year. That's only if you got 3% appreciation. And I have some more thoughts about where interest rates are going in the economy. But for now, we'll circle back to that. From now, it's amazing. So if you bought a house for $350,000, you put up $35,000 as your 10%. You got 3% appreciation on $350,000. You literally made 30% on your money in 1 year. So in my eyes, whether I'm not a stock guy, bond guy, what have you, I really believe real estate is a great place to be. And the pool of buyers, this millennial generation going through the pipeline, they're the biggest population that we've ever seen, bigger than the baby boomers. And they do not peak for another 2 or 3 years. So you still have this massive amount of buying interest in the market, so that if you did buy something today or tomorrow, what have you, chances are it will appreciate for the foreseeable future.
And that's normal. 2 to 3% is normal. Before it was 20%. I mean, I'm not putting you on the spot here, but what's 20% in that calculation? You buy a 350 house, a thing appreciates 20%. I mean, that's just not realistic. It's not sustainable. It's eBay on crack.
And you're getting $60,000
$60 grand
on a $300,000
in 1 year. I mean, Magic the Gathering cards don't have that kind of staying power, for goodness sakes. I mean, it's unbelievable. All right, so we talked a little bit about what you're reading on the internet, and it's not, don't be hyped by it and worried about the doom and gloom. I think we got to realize in the capital region, we're pretty insulated. We were insulated 05 to 08. We didn't crash the way the Vegas and Florida and some parts of California did. And the reason for that is we have the state jobs. We have a lot of hospitals. We have a lot of universities. We got the chip fab plants, the nanotechs. We have a lot of that. And so it's not a one size fits all. Excuse me, I'm just getting some text questions. We're going to get to those in a second. It's not a one size, and if you want to ask questions.
You got to talk.
Yeah.
You got to text all at the same time.
If you have questions, you can text me personally. You can put them in this thread, whatever, about the real estate market, about interest rates, whatever. We'll answer them live for you. I do have some questions we're going to get to in a few minutes as well. So we're a little bit insulated in the capital region in that our home values have not gone like this. They've kind of, done, a pretty normal, steady, streamlined thing. But I can't tell you, Drew, how many times a week I get a call or I touch base to someone in my center of influence or just make my calls, and everybody says, Brian, the housing market's terrible. It's a hard conversation to have. I go, yeah, it's terrible if you wanted 20% return on investment. It's not terrible normally. This is still pretty darn good.
And in the capital region, rents are somewhat reasonable. Granted, they went up 9% last year. And that's another reason why buying is so good in this environment, is because rents keep going up, 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 up. And then guess what? You have nothing to show for it at the end of the year. At least with a house, your payment's fairly fixed, and
you can write off. You
9%.
can write off the mortgage,
interest, the taxes.
Yep.
Obviously, if you have a 2, 3, or 4 family, you have depreciation, quite possibly rental income. Who knows? So it's in the capital region. It's affordable. We're not. Florida, they probably went up 100%. In the capital region, we've increased, but not by a dramatic amount where it's pushed a lot of people out of the market. It's still the right choice in terms of buying. And here's one thing, too, that I want to talk about when it comes to interest rates. Yes, 2 years ago or even a year ago, we were at 3% for interest rates.
eBay on crack.
Right, and today I can't say the exact rate, but we're in the high 6s on interest rate. And one thing to keep in mind, if you did, say, for example, purchase a home using an FHA mortgage, a year or 2 years from now, when rates are lower, you could refinance, we call it streamline, an FHA mortgage into a lower interest rate with no money out of pocket and no money added to the principal balance of your loan amount. So it's a beautiful program if you are an FHA buyer, first-time home buyer. You can purchase an FHA financed home up to 300 some odd thousand. So it's not like the loan limits on FHA are super, super low. It's up there. It's funny, I didn't even check lately, but I think they're around $350,000 for an FHA mortgage. So it really brings in a lot of the buyers in the capital region, because that's the world we live in. And you're right. Years and years ago, we were just purely a service industry in the capital region. We lost a bunch of jobs from GE that went to Atlanta. We lost a lot of banking that went to Cleveland with Key Bank. And we are purely just a service type capital region. Now we have Poughkeepsie with IBM. We have nanotechnology in Albany. We have Malta with Global Foundries.
And all the chips now.
We have all the way up to Utica. So you have this tremendous pipeline, or corridor, I should say, from Poughkeepsie to Albany to Malta to Utica, where we're actually creating jobs and more jobs and more jobs, and we're not a service industry anymore. So real estate is local, no matter how you say it. The old adage is location, location, location. Real estate in the capital region has always done well, and we've never hit the peaks, we've never hit the lows. We've always been kind of steady Eddie. And obviously it's the capital of New York, so we have a tremendous amount of state employees for stability as well.
And you know, we'll get to the questions here in a minute, but I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about you know, buyers. So let's explain. I want to explain to you being in the field, being in the trenches, if you will, the way it was really up to about 6 months ago of the previous 2 years. You had, and everybody, let's go back, because I want to give a little bit of a breakdown as to what happened, sort of how did we get here, right? Because someone asked, they texted me yesterday, and they said, Brian, I want you to explain to me why this has happened. And I'm going to give you my opinion. I mean, I don't, you know, there could be 170,000 opinions on this, but I'm going to give you my opinion as to sort of how we got here. And maybe, you know, we can't predict the future, but maybe where we're going to go or where we should go, where it's healthy to go. So how we got here, let's go back 2.5 years ago. All right. So COVID happens. We're all pooping our pants. Okay. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm talking about, I don't mean with the, you know, obviously the virus and everything like that. We didn't know what the heck was going on. Right.
It really didn't. Wasn't it? It was really eerie. There was about 30 days, 2 weeks where we didn't know what was going to happen next. It was bizarre. It was
a Black Mirror episode on Netflix. It was bizarre. So we'll talk a little bit about, you know, that happens and everyone panics. The real estate industry, I could safely say, it was probably one of the few economy. I think, my opinion, I think it kind of kept the economy going.
Oh, totally.
I mean, it honestly did.
Right.
It honestly did, because there was so much that was shut down. You know, people weren't eating out. You know, it kept the economy going.
Actually, I could say 4 things, and this wasn't planned.
No.
Housing. People were buying pools. People were eating at pizza places.
And they were
liquor.
Yeah. Well, and buying pools and home improvements.
Oh yeah.
Combo of
off
both.
The charts.
Right.
Everybody staycationed.
Right. So you had people that were, you know, the housing market sort of kept the economy going. And what you had was you had people that were in their house and they're looking at each other and they're going, honey, this place is too small. Or why are we paying rent when we can buy? And then all of a sudden the rates dipped. Okay, so the rates dipped and the housing market, people looked at each other and went, oh my God, we can buy a house for what we're renting.
Right.
And so you had a giant, and the rates got so low, you had a giant influx of buyers.
Right.
Okay? You had a giant influx of buyers. Now, let's go back 2 years ago, May, June 2020. You had a lot of buyers. Their rents were high. Okay? You had sellers that, and I don't care how you felt about the pandemic. We're not getting into that. My point is in May or June of 2020, you didn't mind going to Target for 20 minutes.
Right.
You didn't want Target coming to your house. And I don't care who you were. Most people sort of felt that way.
Right.
I don't want 70,000 people coming in my home and breathing and sneezing. Again, we didn't know what the hell was going on. Right. So you had a lot of sellers that were afraid. And I've told people, I don't care how you felt. I don't care how I felt. If 10% of the market didn't want to list, what happens to supply and demand? And I'm probably being generous with 10%.
Yeah, no, I know.
Older people not sure about what's going on, people that had...
People were scared.
People were scared, people that had compromised immune systems, they didn't want to list their house. So just think in any market, if there's 10% less sellers and there's an influx of buyers, what happens?
200 million household, I think it is, right?
And,
are we about 200
yeah,
million?
And then the rates go down and you have an influx of buyers, but you have sellers that don't want to sell because, you know, there was that. They maybe don't want to let people in their home. They're afraid. And then the sellers that are saying, all right, well, I'll get my house sold, but where the hell am I going to live?
Right.
So that was kind of why the market got crazy.
And keep in mind, let's think about it. If you work for Bank of America in New York City, but now all of a sudden you can work remote, why should I live in New York City when I can live in upstate New York
or
much
wherever,
less cost
right?
of living, or live in Colorado, or live in, who knows? I know there's a bunch of stockbrokers that were moving every month. They go to a different Airbnb all over the country.
Because it was cheaper.
Because they could go to LA.
Right.
They could experience different lifestyles all over the country, because it didn't matter where they were. They didn't have to commute and take the train and commute 2 hours from Long Island to New York City and have to be there. It was amazing.
And I sold 2 or 3 people in 2020 and 2021. They worked in Albany and they had IT jobs, and one moved to family in Cleveland, and the other one moved to like Portland, Oregon, because they could still do their job remotely. All right, so that's kind of how we got here. And then the rates went down. Right. So then you had an influx of buyers, low interest rates, sellers that maybe didn't want to sell, sellers that were okay with COVID, but then just didn't want to sell because they didn't know where the hell they were going to live. Right. So that's kind of how we got here. Okay, so every house, and I could safely say this because I did it, and you know too, because you processed a lot of these loans. Right. Every house that I listed or had buyers on in the last 2 years, minus the last 5 or 6 months, every house went for over the asking price with multiple offers.
Yep. 100%.
Without fail. And there were no FHA loans, there were no VA loans, there was no seller concessions. And I know you don't talk in absolutes, right? But actually that's an absolute.
But literally.
Did you do it? Seriously,
100%.
From May of 2020 to maybe 5 months ago, did you do an FHA loan?
Till maybe mid to late summer.
You didn't do an
FHA?
FHA?
My first FHA in 2.5 years. And that was a big part of my market because, again, we're in a very affordable area. Loan limits are not that high, so it conformed to all the loan limits by FHA, VA, USDA. And it was a big part of my business. I would say maybe 30-40% of my business was FHA, VA, USDA. And anybody, unfortunately, that wanted that type of financing wouldn't be able to get a house. They couldn't compete, unfortunately. And it is what it is. The market drives the market. You really don't have a control over what happens. But I think going forward and what we've seen over the last 12 months, things have changed. And things are continuing to change. And we're trying to get back to a normal market. Thank goodness. Because I think it's healthy for everybody. Not just the two of us, but for all you out there trying to buy a house.
So the purpose and one of the reasons we wanted to do this is because we did not want to give all doom and gloom. We wanted to tell you and really give you information, inform you that the market is going back to normal.
It's healthy.
It was not healthy a year or two ago. Well, I sold my house and I got $60,000 over the asking price. Great. That's not normal. I'm telling you, with Drew, I think we were out to lunch one day. I looked at Drew probably right around Halloween of last year, and I said, Drew, these rates have got to rise or we're going to be in trouble.
And you're actually 100% accurate in the sense, I follow the interest rate markets, I follow the bond markets, I look at inflation. Inflation is the single driver right now of why interest rates are going up. And you are correct. Last May, June, July, August, even September, we had next to nothing in the way of inflation. I think it was 0.2%. So now we're comparing May, June, July, August, September of this year, comparing it to a year ago when we didn't have inflation. And obviously inflation is off the rails compared to where we were a year ago. So unfortunately, the Federal Reserve waited too long to start bumping rates. They should have bumped last October.
Yep.
And instead they waited till March. So now March, they waited 6 months too long. They panicked. And they are panicking in the sense they're bumping. We're going to get next week, I believe the Fed meets for the 2-day session. It's already baked into rates. They're going to bump another 0.75%. And December, from what all indications look like, they're going to bump another 0.5%. And that's all public knowledge. I'm not a genius or I have a crystal ball. Everybody pretty much knows that's what's going to happen. The Federal Reserve bumping rates is not necessarily a bad thing for us as consumers.
And when you mean rates, you mean?
They mean the Fed funds rate.
Not mortgage rates.
Not mortgage rates.
Okay, that's important.
Right, good point. Mortgage rates are market driven. So if the Fed is doing their job in curbing inflation, mortgage rates will actually come down. So even if the next 75 basis point or 0.75% bump next week and maybe a 0.5% bump in December, you could actually see mortgage rates start to moderate and maybe start to trend down. And I think, like a lot of experts, I think at this point, we really, unfortunately, have no way, but we'll probably head into a recession. Everybody's talking about it now, and the recession could happen 12 months, 24 months. Who knows when it's going to happen? But two things happen in the world of real estate. Interest rates go down, and real estate does very well. So
why is that?
Because interest rates are going down.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I think you have a lot of fence sitters that don't want to purchase in this environment because rates are in the upper sixes. And what I think that could be a big mistake, because right now, like you were saying, there's not 10, 15 offers on a house. There's maybe 3, 4, 5 offers on a house. I'd rather buy a house with less competition than more competition.
Correct.
So I think buying now is a great opportunity, because in 12 or 24 months from now, when rates go down, everybody comes back into the market. There you go again. You're going to have supply issues, and everybody's going to be competing against one another. So I'd rather buy something when there's less competition than more.
And it's exactly, again, this is for a buyer, especially a first-time home buyer. I don't want you to be scared of the rate. You're not married to that rate, right? You're dating the rate. You're married to the house, right? You can always refinance. And the rates, we don't know when, because we don't want to predict, but they're going to go down. I mean, we know that eventually. It's a cyclical market.
Getting inflation under control, and then the rates will start to come down again.
Right. So, first-time home buyers, you're not going to be in a line of 12 other offers. I mean, I'm telling you right now, I would have my clients on, their searches, and we'd be looking for houses, and they'd send me a house. Brian, I want to go look at this house today. And I'd say, listen, Sally, you're using a fake name here. Listen, Sally, you're pre-qualified for 300. The house is 289. It just listed. You got no shot. I mean, I didn't say that. I'm a pretty straight shooter. I may have actually said that. I basically said, look, that's going to be really tough for you, because you only got 10 grand to play with. I mean, but think of that from a perspective of you're a buyer, or just like in a real world scenario. You're pre-qualified for a 300. Sorry, you're getting more texts. Oh my God. See, we're going to answer questions. Questions are coming in. You can message me. You can send me a direct message here in this to my Facebook, or just post the question in the thread. We're going to answer your questions. I'm sorry. We're going to get to that in a second. I don't even remember where I was. Oh, I said, think about that. You're pre-qualified for a $300,000 house.
Right.
The house is 289, and I tell you, Sally, there's already 2 offers on the house. Obviously, I don't know what the offers are for, but you can use the context clues. The house been on the market a day. There's 2 offers. There's 16 showings today. It's going over 300. You literally can't pre-qualify. And Drew, how many times did I go to you and go, where can this client, what's their max?
Right.
And that was, to me, it was mind-boggling. And I felt bad for the buyer, but unfortunately, that was the game, that was the market we were in. You had to sort of deal with it. And I admittedly, and you probably could say the same, I don't want to say lost, but I had several buyers, each of the last 2 years, at least 5 buyers, just flat out put their searches on hold.
Right. No, I agree 100%. And now, with rates going up and it being the time to buy, you kind of got to push the negativity to the side, and don't always hear the noise or listen to the noise that you see in the media and certain media outlets. Like I've seen even CNBC always get it wrong a lot of the time. So you have to do what's right for you. And I still feel home buying, given even just a 3% rate of return, will do extremely well next year. You can always refinance, and there's a lot of tools right now that you can do to keep your payment affordable. You can do an adjustable rate mortgage where it's fixed for the next 5, 7, 10 years even.
An ARM.
Not have to worry about the rate changing for 5, 7, or 10 years, all knowing that within the next 5, 7, or 10 years, most likely either you'll sell the house or refinance the house. You can do a streamline refinance, like we did an example earlier. If you bought a house for, say, $300,000 and the rate was in the upper sixes, your principal and interest portion of your payment is $1,848. And let's fast forward, say rates get back to 4.5%. You can streamline your interest rate and refinance, and you would save $400 or $500 a month.
Because that new payment would be about $1,400 or
Right.
something like that. Just rough math. Would you
Just
like to say
back of the napkin.
Back of the napkin
Back
math.
of the napkin.
I love that. That is like one of my favorite Drew lines. Back of the napkin.
You got all
math.
the lines. I just came up with one.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
got a
5
couple.
years.
I got a couple 2 trees. All right, let's get to some questions here. We're gonna get to some questions. All right. So we have a question from Corey. Corey asks, "Is now a good time to both buy and sell, Brian?" That's a good question. All right.
I like the fact that it said Brian.
Yeah. Right.
That's your department.
Well, let me talk a little bit about selling your home, because everybody says, well, you know, what do I do? And da, da, da. Here's the real, this is another, you want my line? Want another line? No, another line for the kids. Okay. Write it down. If you learn nothing else from this, you write this down. The real estate market does not revolve around the real world calendar. Okay? Sure. The real estate market does not revolve around the real world calendar. What does that mean? Okay. Nobody, you know, everybody wants to buy and sell or sell their house from May to October, or May to September, right? But life happens, okay? Pregnancies, kids move out, kids graduate in December. I graduated in December, 4.5 years, University of Maryland, class of '93. Divorce.
We're not going to ask about the half part.
Yeah, half extra. Back then, everyone did like a half extra. Did you graduate in 4?
I had to.
Because you went to BU, dude.
My father said, "Get it done in 4. That's
Yeah,
it. I'm
yeah.
not paying for anything else."
In the late 80s, guys, and early 90s, graduate. I think every one of my friends was a 4.5er at Maryland. What are you gonna do? Sorry, Mom, love you. I think my mom is watching. Appreciate you. But unfortunately, death happens. Someone goes into a home. Grandma passes away. People have had the house for 2 years. They don't want to heat it again in the winter. I mean, so the real world calendar: life, death, birth, college, job loss, job promotion, relocation.
Divorce is a big
Divorce.
Yeah.
That does not revolve around the real estate calendar, the May through August, September calendar. So people are always selling their house. Consequently, the buying side does not revolve around the real life calendar. I've got 2 clients right now, 2 new clients. They're getting married. They want to buy a house. They're renting. Rent's $1,900 a month.
Right.
Mary, I'm not going to say her last name, but Mary.
Right.
Her rent's expensive. Another couple, they're getting married. They want to buy a house. They want to do it now.
Throw down roots, have a family.
Exactly.
All
So
those life-changing events.
So they don't want to rent anymore, or buyers are just in a situation where they need to buy. And again, lots of leases end at weird times.
Right.
There's no lease that ends, not every lease ends June 30th or May 30th or April 30th. A lot of leases end freaking Christmas. You know what I mean?
The good thing about leasing is there's also a shortage in rentals, and that's obviously why rents continue to go up.
And buyers are out there.
If you are leasing and you're worried about getting out of your rental to buy a house, a lot of times they can fill your spot like that, so you're not on the hook for the remainder of your lease. So don't let that be a barrier to you buying if you're financially set on buying and have all your ducks in a row on buying. So
getting back to the question that Corey asked about buying and selling at the same time, it is very tricky. In this market, it is very tricky. But I can tell you that in terms of selling your home, there's no right or wrong time to sell. In fact, I'd argue that in the holiday season, people tend to be in a more jovial, excited mood. Your house is decorated for the holidays. It's a positive, you feel sort of euphoric, you know, walking around through a house where, you know, people have the Christmas presents or the menorah out there, you know, he's the Italian with the nice Jewish bride. So it's all good in the hood. You know what I'm saying? Just like Sebastian.
Right, same exact.
My favorite comedian and your favorite comedian.
Totally.
So that is it's a good question, Corey, and it can be done. And it's something that I would discuss with all my clients about how to do it. I can tell you just my experience, and I'm not saying this is advice that I would necessarily give to you, because not one size doesn't fit all, right? Correct. But every situation is different. But I think almost every single one of my clients that's had to buy and sell, I'm going to answer the question here, Corey. Every one of my clients that's had to buy and sell at the same time during the last 2 years has actually been able to, knock on wood, qualify to quote unquote hold 2 mortgages at the same time. But because we know and again, every situation is different, but we know the market, it's not the olden days where you'd buy a house and you'd have to wait, you know, your house be on the market for 62 days. The average time on the market in the capital region, my average time on the market, my stats is 7 days.
Wow.
Okay.
Still low.
The MLS average is about 16.
And what's
normal?
What's a normal market?
Oh, normal market is 38 days.
38 days.
Yeah.
So it's still.
So it's half of what it is. Mine is a fourth of what it is. Actually, I can even look that up.
That was
literally.
Another question. It's not necessarily a sidebar, but remember how we said if you had FHA, VA, or USDA needed seller concessions in the previous 2.5 years, you were shut out of the market. What about if you had to sell a house to buy a house? You're also shut out of the market.
Well, that's what we're talking about now. That was Corey's question about doing both at the same time.
So now you could make an offer on a house with the contingency, I should say, of selling your house. Or not yet?
It's more than likely to happen today than it was 6 months ago. And again, I was lucky. Not all one size fits all. Talk to your mortgage lender. Talk to your realtor about this, but subtle. I'm not subtle or anything.
No. Hey, it's what you do.
But again, I was lucky in that you sort of had, you know, buyers that were able to hold 2 mortgages at the same time. And I can tell you safely, and you know this, we're speaking facts of my particular. None of our clients ever had to do. They never paid twice.
Right.
Because the house, we bought them a house on a Tuesday. Their house went on the market Friday. It was sold Saturday. They were closing within a week of each other. Correct. Or maybe 3 weeks of each other. But there was a lot of buffer time in between in terms of when you had to pay a mortgage. And we'll get into that in 1 second, because that is going to lead me to the next question I have here.
Yeah.
But again, so it is more doable than it was.
Right. Because if you had a contingency on selling, you were stuck. You had to buy without a contingency, or you had to sell your house, live in an apartment, and then go find a house.
I'm actually going to look at, this is real world numbers. I'm going to look at what the stats were of what my time on the market is. Okay, you asked what the Sinkoff time on the market was.
Sell it with Sinkoff, time on the market.
You wanted it.
SWS, sell it with Sinkoff.
All right, next question. Let me see. Let me get to the question here. Oh, this was good. This was Rick asked this. He said, Brian, what if I bought a house tomorrow? What's the timeline of a closing?
Oh, that's good too.
Good question.
That's changed a lot too, because obviously the amount of loans and mortgages being done right now, I think mortgage demand, I don't know if it's the capital region, but mortgage demand nationwide is at a 25-year low. So I don't know if that's necessarily happening here, because again, we're somewhat insulated from the rest of the country. But what does that tell you? That means if you do have an accepted offer, there's not 1 million people in the pipeline that have to get processed and underwritten and appraisals done, inspections done, and all that stuff that's necessary. You could literally close in 3 weeks, where it used to be almost a shoo-in for 45 to 60 days. So if you need to make an offer and you can promise to close in 2 to 3 weeks, very fast, chances are you might have a better shot at getting that offer accepted because you can offer a quick closing. Where last 2.5 years, there wasn't a lot of quick closings going on because of so many people that were trying to do the same thing you are. So right now, in a more stable market, more organized market, I should say, having a closing in 3 weeks, 4 weeks is somewhat commonplace.
What's your typical? Putting you on the spot.
Right now it is 3 to 4 weeks. A lot of times what I try to do is I try to collect everyone's pay stubs, W-2s,
out of the box
initially, before they even find a house. So that when you actually do find a house, we just have to do the appraisal, we have to do title, and you're done.
Right.
So there's really not a minutia once you find your house if all your ducks are in a row prior to finding that house.
And so and we're going to do the 1 month, and we'll do the 6 week, which is pretty typical. And some buyers are like, I don't want to close so soon. So if you bought a house, just say 10/25 tomorrow, right? You close on that, you put the offer and it gets accepted on October 25th. Realistically, you're probably moving in that first week of December.
Yeah, I would say most contracts are written commitment 30 days, close in 45. Right? 30 days, 45 days, 1 month, 6 weeks. That's normal, but you can, obviously everything's on or about, you can speed things up if you need to. But you're right, and then if you closed, say if you found a house tomorrow, you close in being in December, you wouldn't actually even have a mortgage payment until February. You would skip January for a mortgage payment. Your first mortgage payment wouldn't be due until February 1st, which is also very nice.
All right, so here are my stats. I can only speak to myself. My average time on the market, 5 days. The MLS, these are my listings. The MLS average is 43 days. Drew, you see?
Wow.
I'm not, look.
I'm witnessing this.
Yep, MLS 43. Mine is 5.
My hand is on the Torah and the Bible.
So that's a real stat from yours truly. My house is selling 5 days. The MLS average is 43. I'm looking at it right here.
Good stuff.
So that is as far as that goes, as far as time on the market. So yeah, good question about the timeline. Let's just here's another one. Karen, she messaged me through Facebook in the middle of this. Karen said, Brian, I want to buy, but I'm nervous. Well, Karen, she says, I'm nervous about the market, nervous about the future, nervous about all of the above, and just nervous because buying a house is overwhelming. All right, Karen, that's awesome that you say this.
That's common.
It's common. And I tell people...
anything you do for the first time is... That's your little anxiety because you don't know what you don't know.
Correct. Right? And if you should be nervous. In fact, when I go over with the buyer, I go over with the new buyer, I actually tell them, I do a whole little buyer presentation, and my buyer clients out there can attest to this. Feel free to say this. I do a whole 5, this is going to happen during a real estate transaction. And number 1 is you're going to become anxious or nervous.
Right.
You're going to become anxious or nervous. You're going to become anxious or nervous. I say it like 3 times because I go, it is normal for you to be nervous. It's like if you don't take a test, when you're taking a big test and you're not nervous, that's not normal. If you're in a game, you play sport, you're at a recital, you're at a play, I don't care what you do, yep. You have that adrenaline, that nerves, because you just, as you said, you don't know what you don't know. You've never done this before.
Right.
But that's why it's so important.
It's like the first day of school, right?
Exactly.
2 weeks later, you're fine.
Correct.
The first day?
And I don't care what grade you're in.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like you could be a kindergartner, a 9th grader, even a senior. You're nervous, right?
Doesn't matter. I did radio for probably 15, 20 years, mortgage related. All we did was talk. Every single show before the show, I was always anxious, always nervous.
Were you nervous before this?
I'm just nervous being around you.
I don't even know what the hell that means, by the way.
I just, Facebook Live, it's just talking about what we do for a living. No, this doesn't make me nervous.
Right.
But talking to 50,000 watts of potential listeners, that would always make me nervous. That's normal.
As you know, I did a radio show called Sound Off with Sinkoff. It was on the ESPN radio.
I was listening to you before I even knew you.
That's crazy. It's quite phenomenal when you go back. I think I'll give a little radio because everyone, Sinkoff, people are out talking sports in this thread. Sinkoff, how about the Commanders? So let me give you guys a little, right, let me give you a little inside baseball about sort of when I was on the radio. I did I get another question. See, I like this. We're getting some messages for questions.
There you go again.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
2 more questions. I did a little radio show, ESPN Radio here in the Capital Region for 3 years. It had good ratings, the whole 9 yards. Everyone knows the story. New company came in, one of their own people was let go, and then got into real estate. And haven't looked back. And you know what? I thank the people that got rid of me in radio because thank you. You changed my career.
Me too, because then I bet him.
Yeah, you changed my career. So thank you for letting me go. I appreciate that. Now my life is 100% better. But going back to the story of getting nervous and getting nervous in the radio, I did that every day, 5 days a week, 4 hours a day for 3 years. Every day I got on, it was less nerves as you went. I mean, the first few shows, holy crap. I mean, I wore a diaper. I'm not even kidding. It was a good thing I had a diaper.
Brought in probably in case you forgot about something to say.
And I always over-prepared. I mean, that was one of the reasons why, even in the end, I was preparing 3 hours a day for show prep. It was a tedious job because you really had to, I equated it in a goofy scale. It was like, I was arguing sports all day, so I had to sort of have my arguments and then prepare arguments that I think the other side would say. So it was like preparing for a freaking trial every day for 4 hours a day, right? But I was always a little nervous. And even, doing it for years, I was always nervous. And that was normal. And going back to the Karen comment about how she's nervous, it's normal to be nervous, but when you have professionals on your side, such as Drew and myself, hint, hint, wink, wink, but whatever real estate agent, whatever mortgage lender you're using, if you have good people on your team and people that have been there and been, seen the ups, seen the downs, seen the everywhere in between, because I don't want to say I've seen it all, and I know you haven't seen it all, but I like to say we've seen. Another question. We've seen 80% maybe of what can happen, maybe more than that.
I think every day I learn something every day in this business because it's not a cookie cutter, one size fits all kind of business. And I ran into a deal this morning. This will make you laugh, where this guy was a first-time home buyer trying to buy a house. Lo and behold, he's negotiating with the seller. His own brother came in and tried to buy that same house. And when you say you've seen it all, that's a new one. I've never seen that one before.
Well, and look at last week on my Facebook Live. We go through a walkthrough, and you were on this deal.
Yeah.
It was my purchasers, and the furnace is leaking, like not leaking water. It was a hose, like you had a hose in the furnace. Well, it turns out it was the and actually it's good that I'm giving a how did it end scenario.
Right.
The humidifier, by the way, if your house has a humidifier, the furnace has one of those old plastic ass humidifiers, take it off today.
Plastic.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like those humidifiers on the back of your furnace, it's in the olden days, it's sort of in the heat, it sort of releases moisture to the heat so you don't have that dry.
Right.
In this day and age, we have humidifiers and vaporizers to do that. What that thing is, it's a house of mold, okay? The thing has mold in it, you're producing mold throughout your home.
True.
You never change the frickin' filter in there. It gets moldy and soaking wet. And invariably, what happened was the tube going in, got loose and exploded, and the water was shooting back off the plastic cover and then shooting down the humidifier. And the humidifier is just useless. Get rid of the damn thing.
Good news is, if you follow yours truly, you saw that because you videotaped it.
I videotaped it. Well, we needed to because it was not going to close that day. We had to
close that day.
We had to get
2 days later.
Yeah, we had to get that rectified. So.
But
good.
Yes, we've never seen it all. What our job is as professionals is to try to make you feel comfortable. It's normal to be nervous, but we're going to take that nervousness away. And what I do from a financing standpoint is make sure that you're comfortable with your payments, your funds needed for closing, so that it alleviates a lot of the stress. And then you can meet with this guy and put in an offer that you're comfortable with.
And let me get another question here.
Stacking up. I don't know if we're going to.
This is from, all right, this is from Alex. Alex says, this is an awesome question, Alex. Oh my gosh, I'm getting more questions. Okay. Holy cow.
You're getting some questions and
People,
some jokes.
people are afraid. People are afraid.
I actually like buying in the winter. I always think winter buying, by the way, where you're looking at your question, is good because there's less buyers out there, less sellers out there, which means that the people selling are selling in the winter. I would assume they're pretty motivated to move. So it's good for you as a buyer.
And also sellers, when you're selling in the winter, you're not going to have looky-loos, tire kickers, what's your chandelier look like, how did you rearrange the furniture, and I want those countertops because I saw them on the internet and I want to know where you bought them.
Right.
I have a lot of those at open houses in the middle of the summer.
Yeah.
All right, Alex asks a question of, Brian, do I need to get pre-qualified before I start looking at houses? Yes,
Paramount.
yes, yes, and yes. It's do not pass go.
Paramount.
Okay.
Always paramount. But even in this environment,
it's
still
especially in this environment. And what that means is we can't just start opening the doors, opening a house for you if you're not pre-qualified. Let me turn it around. You live in a home, even pretend you're renting, but you own that rental. Would you want people coming in your house if they couldn't buy the home? If you're a car dealer and you work at a Mercedes dealer and someone says your Mercedes, your most, I don't want to say cheapest, your least expensive Mercedes on the, let's use Volvo. Yeah, your least expensive Volvo is 40 grand and someone has $6,000 in their pocket. You're not showing them, you're not letting them test drive the car, and you're not wasting your time. And it's not a knock on that person. It's just the reality is time is money.
Plus, you don't want strangers in your house that aren't qualified.
Correct.
And for example, this morning, I talked to someone actually over the weekend on Saturday. He's a W-2 employee, but his wife is self-employed. And I made sure he sent me his tax returns over the weekend. And sure enough, unfortunately, she does not claim as much money as she thought. So the debt ratio is higher, and for the house they want to buy, they do not qualify. So it's making sure that you get your ducks in a row, not only for the seller but also for the buyer, just to have everything solid.
And reality, and this is what I say, you can't look at a house until you make sure that you can afford it. But what I like to say in plain words is make sure you're comfortable with the payments.
Right.
That's the key. What this guy does is before we even look, he goes through everything with you. It's not an intense process. It doesn't take 3 weeks. No. You don't have to meet him in person. We talk about that in 1 second. But that way you know, hey, if the house is $270, here's the payments based on the taxes. If we have to go to $300, here are the payments. It's not a guessing game, and 9 times out of 10, it's to make sure you feel more comfortable, make sure you're pre-qualified, you're comfortable with those payments. And a lot of times, especially in this market, sellers do not want buyers in their home that aren't pre-qualified.
You know what the worst thing I would say, and this isn't rehearsed or anything, I would say the worst thing that happens, you might agree with me.
Steam might come out of my ears when you tell me the story, but go ahead.
Falling in love with a house that you can't afford, right? That's an emotional thing. Husband, wives, the kids maybe are involved. I think that's probably one of the worst things that can happen in the buying process is falling in love with a house you can't afford. So we try to never, ever let that happen.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
never steer people wrong in terms of what their affordability is.
I'm writing an inappropriate joke for Drew. Falling in love with stuff you can't afford. I shouldn't say that, should I?
No.
Okay. All right. How
did I know that was going?
All right. So you're basically falling in love with stuff you can't afford. Don't look at Lamborghinis if you can only afford a Honda Accord. And I'm not knocking a Honda Accord. I had a Honda Accord. I had 2 of them for 15 years. Right? Don't And it's the same thing with the home. And going back to the example earlier, back when the market was eBay on crack, $275,000 house, we know there's 2 offers. It's probably over $300,000 unless you want to spend $325,000. Let's not have you fall in love with that because you got no shot.
Right.
You got no shot.
Stay in your lane, work within your means.
All right, Drew, before we wrap this up, let's get to one more question.
We're at the 1 hour mark.
Oh my
Thank you
God.
all for chiming in and
this
listening.
has been great.
Appreciate the questions.
The questions
Hopefully
have
we
been
answered a lot of your concerns.
The questions have been great.
Tony?
Yeah, let's see what Tony's asking here. I gotta try to paraphrase this. And if you have a question, feel free to post it. Excuse me. Feel free to, I need a little drink of water. Feel free to post it here in the thread. A lot of people are shy. They want to message me. I'm getting 1 million texts during this and some emails. Some people are just flat out emailing me. All right, go ahead, Drew. What were you going to say as I take a sip?
We talked about, I think, one question is recession
Oh.
or bad.
Yes,
And
good one.
It's actually not a bad
That was Tony's question.
It's not a bad thing, just because if you buy a house today and in the next year or two we do go into a recession, real estate does very well in a recession. And if you do have a 6 or 7% interest rate and we do go into recession, interest rates typically go down in a recession. Once again, in order to stimulate the economy, to stimulate housing. Housing is a foundation of our entire country. So if you noticed in 2008, 2009, and then most recently with COVID, the one thing the Fed tries to do is drop interest rates, try to spur the buying of housing, and obviously they want to make things more affordable for us to continue to buy things, which most of our economy is things that we buy as consumers, believe it or not. That's probably, I think, 3/4 of our economy. So that's what the Fed will do. And the Fed drops interest rates, houses become more affordable. If you were pushed out of the market by the higher rates, it brings a lot of people back into the market. And if housing does well, everything else does well. One good thing to look at too for housing is employment. Employment is extremely tight right now. The unemployment rate is extremely low right now, and employment is also the precursor of a good housing market.
So I hope we've answered some of your questions here on this real estate Q&A. Drew Aiello of Fairway Mortgage, Brian Sinkoff, Muccio Real Estate Group, associate broker right here in the Albany Shaker office. Hope we've dispelled some of the myths. Hope we've sort of put you at ease a little bit. It's not all doom and gloom. There is the sun will come out tomorrow.
I can't say.
No, I can't either.
I'm not even going to try.
But on a serious note, we want you to just know that it's not all doom and gloom. The rates going up, believe it or not. I even said this, and my mom, I think she's still watching. Hi, Mom. Say hi to Mom.
Hi, Mom. How are you?
The rates had to go up. It was imperative they went up. I'm actually kind of, in a way, in a goofy sort of way, I'm glad they did. I want them to level out. But it's not all doom and gloom. And I don't want you to panic out there if you're a new buyer, if you're a first-time home buyer, or you're a seller. I don't want you to think that no one's going to want to buy your house anymore, because at the end of the day, here's another Sinkoffism, you got to live somewhere.
Right.
You got to live somewhere, and rent. Thankfully, in the capital region, we talked about how we're kind of insulated. Our rents are pretty darn even with the mortgages. New York City, mortgages here, rents down here, which is still very high, but everybody needs, very few can buy. A lot of people, more people are renting. Here, we're kind of like this.
Right.
We're pretty darn even, which is why our housing market is extremely healthy here in the capital region.
And we're finally getting to somewhat of a more normalized market where supply and demand are equal. It's not quite there, but it's much better than it was 6 or 8 months ago.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's what you want if you're a buyer.
42 showings, 40 people at the open house, 17 offers. That was a listing I had in March. That was not normal. It was unhealthy. It was eBay on crack. My mom says, hi, Brian and Drew.
Hi, Mom.
That's Margie, my mom. All right. All right, so I think we've wrapped it up. Drew, a final word from you. Give us your contact info. Tell everybody how long you've been in the business.
Been in the business since January of 1995.
Woo-wee.
So next, January it'll be 28 years. Before that, I was in the financial services business in Boston, and been pretty much in the capital region overall since 1976, long time. So I know the market well, I know the people well, I know the area very well, and I won't get you into a house that's not affordable. It's one thing that we don't do. So I'm available 7 days a week, and anybody that needs me can get me at drewsteam.com. Easy way to get a hold of me.
And you can click on his name in this link. You can private message him. You obviously can message me, call me anytime, email me. My clients will know I'm a 7-day-a-week realtor as well. And we'll answer, I mean, believe it or not, I shouldn't say this aloud, but I've been known, I'll answer a text at 11 o'clock. Once you're my client, you're in. I'm good like that. So
I'm
that,
good at the 4 a.m. I can't do past 9:30.
Yeah, you're a mess.
Asleep.
You're a mess.
I get too early.
So we want to thank you so much for watching. We appreciate it. We're going to try to do these every couple of months, especially as the market changes and the rates change. So we want to thank you for watching. Good luck on your house hunt. Don't forget, sellitwithsinkoff.com. Brian Sinkoff. He's Drew Aiello, Fairway Mortgage, Independent Mortgage.
Yeah, that's good.
In Clifton Park. Have a great Monday. We'll see you soon.
Enjoy your day.
Take care, everybody.